Okay. How's it going, guys? My name is Josh. I've been part of the Shell for a year now. Today we're going to be talking about introductory to web application hacking. And then if we have time, we can do whatever you guys want, any type of like intro to whatever type of hacking, ethical hacking. If you guys have any questions, if we have time at the end, we can do that. So what is web hacking? What is web app hacking? So pretty much the entire internet is run by web applications, right? So Google.com, Facebook, all these web apps online, they're available 24/7, and that allows a lot of potential security risks because they are available 100% of the time. Anyone can access them, and if you don't secure them properly, then you can be very open to potential attacks. So we're going to be going over mostly the offensive side today. How do you break into web applications? And then we'll do a little bit of review of how you can secure them. And then if you guys have questions, we can address that. So I'm going to pretend that you guys really have no clue. You guys have had no. Can I just get a show of hands who has experience doing that? Okay. Are there any like computer scientists in the room? Computer science majors, engineers? Okay. Okay. Cool. So some of this should sound familiar, but a lot of this stuff you don't learn in school. So I'm just going to go through the basics and then walk us through everything. So a couple of things I'm going to be covering: the HTTP protocol, cookies, cross-site scripting, and SQL injection. The bottom two are the two most common web app vulnerabilities out there. There's a whole list of them, but we're just going to be covering these two today because they're the most common, right? And B, they're the easiest to grasp, right? So what is HTTP? HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's basically the foundation of the web. It's how computers communicate with web apps online. It has a client-server architecture, so the client makes a request to a web server, and the web server responds. So generally, this is how it's laid out. You have the client on the left making a request, and that middle line right there is basically your HTTP protocol. That's what allows the client to communicate with the web app. You have your web server, which issues a response, but can do any number of things. And this is just really like the basics of what it can do. It has a server-side script. So we'll go over a little bit more in depth what that is. And then it can potentially touch a database if there's some dynamic handling. And then it comes back and it feeds a response back to the client. And it uses this HTTP protocol to communicate. It's like a standard for communication. So some examples of what these are: your clients are like your web browsers. If you've ever used wget, that's another example of like a client because you're issuing requests to the server. Your web servers are like Apache, IIS if you're running Microsoft Windows, which server-side scripts, for example, PHP, Node.js, Ruby on Rails, anything that is running on the web server itself. Databases, you have different database languages like MySQL, MS SQL, Postgres, and we'll go into a little bit more in depth what those are. So different types of HTTP requests. These are the two most common that you'll encounter. GET requests. GET requests are used for retrieving information from the server. If you're following the standard, these should have no effect on the data that is stored on the server. So you're only supposed to retrieve that data. An example, and this should actually be a question mark right here, is this URI right here, and ID equals 1. ID equals 1, you're requesting a resource from the user. So this is a typical GET request that you see all the time. Post requests, these are for sending data to the server. So probably the most common example, when you log in to a web application, you're sending a post request to the server with your username and password. File uploads, also another example. So now, once the web server actually receives your request, it's going to give you a response, right? And depending on what you're requesting, it'll issue any number of these response codes. We're pretty familiar with the 200 OK. That's like everything's good. It's giving you a good response. And these are just a few of the others. So, and just to give you guys a heads up, I'm going to try and just go through these really quickly, and we have a lot of hands-on for today. So I've got a couple labs set up, and you guys are actually going to be hacking away. So this is just to give you a general overview, and then you'll be actually doing these yourselves. So, all right, so cross-site scripting, it is the most common web app vulnerability. Input validation vulnerability that typically can run scripts in the browser. And there's two types. There's reflected cross-site scripting and there's persistent. We'll go into a little bit more in depth what that means. But can anyone tell me what would be the problem with having anyone run scripts inside the browser that aren't intended to? What can you do by running a script inside a browser? Yeah.
Like if you're trying to go on like yahoo.com and like someone could probably just like spam Yahoo with some random.
That's very true. So they can, if they're running scripts inside your browser, they can issue requests to Yahoo on your behalf. So it would look like you're issuing all these requests to Yahoo, and maybe you'll get banned from the site. Definitely one thing that could happen. Yep.
Like root access to the website?
So cross-site scripting typically doesn't result in like root access or compromise of the server. Cross-site scripting usually has to do more of the user vulnerability. So we're talking things like cookies, right? Things that are stored in the browser, like the DOM, right? If you can access different variables that are actually on the page at that moment in time, then you could grab like maybe any variable that's like on the page, right? Or even links on the page. You could change those divs. You can change those IDs. You can change those links to point to your own links, like a malicious link, right? So instead of pressing submit and going to the web server, you could change that link and then submit it to your own malicious server. And now I just stole your creds, right? I stole your login information. Probably the most used method of exploitation for this is grabbing cookies and hijacking people's sessions. And we'll go into more depth what that is and how you do it. Reflected, so this is all reflected cross-site scripting. And reflected cross-site scripting is not stored permanently on the server. So it typically happens through GET requests, right? So if you receive a link in your email and you click on that link, right, that's a reflected cross-site scripting attack. And this is just an example of what one attack looks like. So inside of this GET request, we have a parameter. This name variable is going to be processed on the page. And if there's no input validation and it's actually displaying the value of name on the page, then it's going to run this script, right? This script doesn't do anything really. I mean, it just pops up an alert box and it says cross-site scripting. But it's a proof of concept to show that you can inject a script into this web page, and now you can do any number of things, right? Persistent cross-site scripting, a little bit more dangerous. Persistent cross-site scripting is actually stored on the server. So an example of this is like inputting a comment, right? Like when you're writing feedback or something that's stored on the server and then displayed back to the user. So usually reflected cross-site scripting is targeted at a particular person. So I'm going to send you a link. I'm going to send one person a link. And you're going to click that link, and then I'm going to steal your cookies, or I'm going to do something with your particular session. Persistent cross-site scripting can have a much wider effect because multiple people could be browsing to that same page. So let's say a typical web forum, right? If you're posting a blog and there's a comment section, or if you're even posting a blog yourself, and you have other people viewing that blog. So let's say you have 1 million users, 1 million users come into your site every day. That's 1 million people that are getting affected by your persistent attack. So we kind of went through this already. Dangers of cross-site scripting. One thing at the bottom, cross-site request forgery. That's also one of the more common web app vulnerabilities. We won't go too far into depth in this, but essentially XSRF allows you to make changes on another website that you would be browsing at that particular moment in time. So for example, let's say you're browsing your bank website, right? And then there's a website that you're browsing and it has a cross-site scripting vulnerability. If those sites are affected with CSRF, then browsing on my website, I can make a transaction on your bank website, right? So it's cross-site and I'm forging the request. So I'm going to make a transfer for myself. So it's a really big vulnerability. It's often overlooked. So we touched on this, cookies and session hijacking. So this is the most common form of abuse of cross-site scripting. Can anyone tell me what cookies are?
Delicious.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Little bits of references stored on your browser.
Yes. They don't always have to be stored on the browser. They could even be stored on your client. So it could be saved to disk. Like if you
Like for an application, desktop application.
yes,
Or
yes, or both actually. Yes. So for that case, Jeff, that you're talking about actually being stored on the client. So a lot of sites would use that to tell if you visited their site before, right? So they'll store a cookie on their machine. They'll check for that cookie again the next time you come back, and then they can do some analytics on it or whatever. So cookies are generally, they're used for tracking sessions, right? So you log into a website, and as Jeff was saying, it can store particular data about your unique session with that web server. So if I log in with my username and password, and then I browse to another page that requires authentication, I don't have to type in my username and password every time, right? That would be just super tedious. So instead, there's this framework by utilizing sessions that you don't have to enter your password each time, but instead you feed a cookie each time, right? Or you validate your session a different way. So this session, this cookie is being stored in your browser, and it's being sent back and forth every time you make a request to the website. And it's essentially proving your session, your validity to be authenticated every single time. So again, by stealing someone's cookie and feeding it to the web server, you can impersonate that user. So we're actually going to do this. You guys are, each one of you guys are going to steal some cookies, and then you're going to log in as somebody else. So SQL, structured query language. It's essentially a database standard, and there's different implementations of SQL. There's MySQL, MS SQL, Postgres. Can I just get a show of hands who's familiar with SQL syntax, what it is? Okay, so we'll go through it. RDBMS, Relational Database Management System, all of these languages that I just mentioned, like MySQL, MS SQL, these are all RDBMS languages. So they're relational in that there are certain relations between tables within the database, and you can create those relations and make queries based off of them. So just some basic SQL syntax, and actually we'll go through some of it on the board. You have your basic select, insert, update, delete. And this is an example database, right? So storing user information. We have customer IDs, customer names, contact names, addresses, cities, postal codes, and countries. So SQL syntax, if we want to retrieve some information from the database, we're going to use a select query. We're going to use a select statement. If we want to put information into the database that doesn't exist yet, we're going to use insert. If we want to update information that's already there, we're going to use update. If we want to delete things, we're going to delete them. And there's plenty of others, but that's just the bare bones, the basics of it. So how would you get the address of all customers from Mexico? So this is a typical query that you would want, or at least know how to do. Let's say if someone's filtering by country and they select Mexico, right? That's something that you would want to do. And in order to display that on the page, you have to make a SQL query to your database, tell it exactly what information you want, and then you can display it to the user, right? So can anyone tell me, those of you who have experience with SQL, what this would look like? Yeah. Let's say the table name is customers.
So we say select the column address.
Select.
Then the column, the name of the column is address.
Okay.
From what is the name of the database?
Customers.
From
The name of the table.
the name of the table, sir.
Yeah. But you want only customers from Mexico. So how would you narrow that down?
Where
Where? Yeah.
the column country
Country equals Mexico. Okay. Good. Okay. So essentially what this looks like is you give it an action, what you're doing, you want to select information out of the database. You tell it what you want, what columns you want. So if you look up here, we want to get the country column. So we want to select address, and we tell it which table we're in. There can be multiple tables in the database from customers. And then we have a condition that says where country equals Mexico. So we're only grabbing the countries from Mexico, right? So basic syntax, and this is going to come into play when we're doing SQL injection. You guys are going to need to understand how SQL statements are set up so you can take advantage of them and exploit them. So what is SQL injection? Anyone tell me what SQL injection is? Yeah.
Would it be that?
Exactly, thank you. Malicious, improperly sanitized SQL statements, which are inserted into a parameter and executed. So what does it mean to be inserted into a parameter?
Like country equals Mexico? Is that like?
Exactly. So we have a couple parameters here. This one in particular, we would be feeding directly to the database, right? So this query could be predefined in our code, and it probably is. And this Mexico is probably a variable, like $Mexico, right? Or whatever syntax you're using. And you're going to inquire from the user what country you want. You're going to set that equal to your variable, and then you're going to feed it into your SQL statement, right? So if Mexico is not properly sanitized, then we could take advantage of this SQL statement. So SQL injection, this is how it works. Basic example, a login page. You have a web form that accepts a username and a password. You have a SQL statement, select ID from logins where username equals $username and password equals $password. So just like in this case, we have a predefined SQL statement, and we have two variables, $username and $password. So these are input from the user, and they're going to get fed into the database query, and then it's going to execute this statement and see if it's an existing user, right? And if it is, it'll log you in, and if it's not, then you'll get an error or whatever. So an unsanitized query, if we want to take advantage of this, right, we're going to feed it Joe. Joe is our username. Could really be anything. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. And then we're going to feed it anything, which can really be anything. And then notice how at the end, we're not just closing it off. We're actually adding our own single tick, and then we're adding an or tick x equals tick x. Does everyone see how that happened? Is anyone confused by that? Okay, so what does this do? So this is really what it's in. And I'll try and make this a little more clear. Pretend these are single quotes. So these are actually surrounding them, but that's not our user input. This is our user input. So what does this do? So what is, if you're going to evaluate this expression, what does this evaluate to? True, right? We're seeing if x equals x, which is always going to be true, right? This is true. Anything is probably going to be false. It's probably not going to be in the database, right? But what's false or true?
True.
True. So this is actually going to evaluate true. So regardless of what password we have, assuming Joe is a real user, because we have an and in that statement, right? Assuming Joe is a true user, this is going to return true. And what's going to happen in our web app?
Log into the thing without
We're going to be logged in
password.
without the password. Exactly. So this is SQL injection. This is the most basic form of SQL injection. There's a lot of things that you can do. You can grab information from the database, sensitive information. You can grab passwords. You can grab customer information. You can grab admin logins. Not in every case, but these are the potential with SQL injection. Any questions on that? Does everyone understand how we actually got this to return true, what this injection did for us?
Because you put an or and then a true statement right after or?
Exactly. We put a statement after or that will always return true, no matter what. And because of that, yeah.
So in this case, that's
Exactly. Because the SQL statement is returning true, you're not doing any additional checks, right? You're trusting the database is giving you unprovoked true answers. Yeah.
Instead of put X into X, you put just like number one there.
I'm sorry.
Instead of put X
Yes.
equal to X, could you just put like one?
So you can't put 1 because you have to evaluate an expression, right? But what you could do is do or 1 equals 1, right? Any expression that returns true.
Why do you need anything or at first? Can't you just say password equal to X equal to X?
So you don't even need anything,
Right.
but you need this tick, you need this quote, because you have to close off this quote right here. Right? So if you don't have this, this is actually going to be all part of the string password. Right? So what you're doing is you're saying password is now null, right? Password is null, tick tick, right? Password is null. Just like saying $password equals blank, right? And then we're saying or true.
So then that can make it false.
So say
That would make that false then.
that would make it true because we have an or true.
Right.
And actually, even if we didn't know Joe, we didn't know the username, we could do the same thing in the username field. Right? But since there's an and there, we have to either have one, we have to either use the correct username, or if both fields are vulnerable, then we have to inject in both fields. Okay, we'll come back to this. All right, so let's actually get to hacking some web apps. So I have a web forum that's sitting at this IP address. Let me write it on the board. Can everyone see that?
I'm new. Check right.
Oh, I should have left that. Can you read that?
Maybe next year we will
Oh,
call
no,
it.
the IP address.
104.236.225.207 /vol/index.php.
So navigate to this URL.
Can you just hack my girlfriend's Facebook or not?
That comes in lesson number 2. 228. That's in part 2, Rob. There we go. Okay, so if you're able to, okay, so what are we doing here? Was everyone able to navigate to this? Anyone not able to get to this page? Okay, what?
Fix 225.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're right up there, but 228, yeah.
Classic web.
Okay, so we have a login page here, and I'll help you out, and I'll tell you that the backend code, the backend PHP for this is written almost identically to what this example that we were looking at, the SQL injection example. You can inspect the source if you want to give you some more insight. So what are we doing here? I have an admin interface, right? I'm logged in, and you guys don't have a username or well, I guess you have a username now, Josh, but you don't have a password. So use SQL injection and try and break in. So once you're there, there's a search box. Get the admin password. And I got a little, you'll have help, so. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see.
Oh, okay. Now, you want to inject the multiple password. So,
Yeah.
You know, that anything
Do you need the closing after the second?
No.
Two.
Okay, so do you remember the example we went over? So basically using
You need to make a straight line,
over.
like a straight line before anything, and then all the huh? You don't need it?
He was just using that to explain where the variable started.
Okay. So for password, I'll just start with anything.
So it's basically identical to this. So if you're having trouble, use this to guide you through it. How's everyone doing? Who got through? Okay, good.
You need a space bar after anything.
You don't need it, but you can have it.
Okay. Okay.
So you want to close off with the tick. Close it, the tick, and you want space.
Close off, Josh.
No. In the password field. So we're basically tick, space, or, and then we need a true statement. So we have up there, we have
Tick x tick equals tick x tick.
no tick at the end. Two. All right, how are we doing? Anyone nodding yet? Okay, let's go over this. So we have a username and password field. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show you the back-end code for this, and then you can see exactly what it's doing.
Without a ticket.
Okay.
Josh. Start off with tick.
Okay. Did everyone see that? Okay. Does everyone see the SQL statement the select statement. So we have select star from users where password equals tick dollar password tick and username equals tick dollar username tick. End quote, end statement, right? So how are we going to exploit this? We have our two parameters, password equals tick dollar pass. We have an and username equals tick dollar user tick. Okay. So I'm going over this because I want to make sure you guys understand exactly what you're doing to the statement, right? And not just copying what we did, because it's exactly the same as the example. So we have a password field. This is going to get filled in by the user, right? We need to close off this initial tick. And then we need to create a true statement, or 1 equals 1. And we're going to leave this side open for this tick right here. Right? So that's going to evaluate to true, and that's going to evaluate to true. Everyone good? Any questions on that? Yeah?
How can I do that? I can't do that.
You can't view it. I can only view it because I have console access because I own the site. If everyone could see it, that'd be a big problem. Yeah.
So how do you screw out using
Say it again.
How do you, let's say we didn't have a user. So how do we, without creating Josh, use that section?
Because user is also getting supplied by the form. So it's another variable being passed into the statement.
Yeah, but before that, it's an answer. So it would be an order to be like and involves four neighbors. And that needs to go order.
But it's not false. So this is going to evaluate, so it's two separate statements, right? This entire statement needs to evaluate to true, and this entire bottom statement needs to evaluate to true. So since there's two variables being passed in, we have to inject on both variables. So we either have to inject or we have to know what the right value is, right? So we either need to know any user in the database. We either need to know any user in the database, or we need to inject on this field. So we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did up there. So now this entire thing is turning true, which meets our criteria. This is turning true, so now we have true and true. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah, but it's not.
What doesn't seem like it?
I'm using the same thing. But like when I use it, when I swap out the username for that.
When you swap out the username for this statement?
Yeah, if I use it for a password,
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Okay, we'll look.
like when I write
I'll
down,
come over there in a second.
when the username, if I know it as Josh, when I write down username Josh, and for the password I do that, it works. But if I do that with the username and password, it doesn't work.
Okay. I'll come to you guys afterwards and I'll look at it so that everyone else can move on. Okay. Does everyone understand where we're at? Okay. Next thing we're gonna do is do some reflected and persistent cross-site scripting. So there's another page here, comment.php. And I'm going to log in as the admin here. Okay, so I can see, can someone post a comment?
I posted one.
Okay, so I can see your comments. So this is persistent cross-site, this is a persistent cross-site scripting vulnerability, right? Essentially what's happening here is there's user-provided input, and I'm displaying it on the page, and I'm not sanitizing it correctly. So what I want you guys to try and do is pop up an alert box on my system.
How do you do that?
So we went over some JavaScript earlier. Well, let me give like 2 seconds for people to try and figure it out, and then.
Can you refresh your page? I wrote it down.
So we got one person that did it already. Hi, Josh. So we have 2 people. Two people so far.
Give me an alert.
You getting there?
Do you see if I did it?
Yeah. Oh, you're close. So what you need to do is you need to enclose it in 2 script brackets because you're actually running JavaScript, not HTML. So start it with a open caret script, close caret, and then end it with open caret / script, close caret. We got 3. Okay, for those of you that have, okay, we'll go over in a second before we actually keep going. So we got what, 5 people now? So let's go over this. What we're doing is receiving user input from a comment, and without doing anything to the comment, we're displaying it on the page, right? So what can we do with this? Most of you guys have figured it out. We can run a script. So we can run some JavaScript. That's when things get interesting. How do you run JavaScript in HTML on a web browser within HTML? Anyone? Script tags. Good. So you need to open up a script tag, and then you have your JavaScript in lines, and then what do you do at the end?
Close the tag.
Close the tag. Okay. Good. So how do we pop up an alert box? Yeah. That's all it is. So we can use this to test for cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. This doesn't really do anything for us, right? Nothing really interesting here. But we can see that it's vulnerable, right? So what's something more interesting that we can do? Some of the things that we talked about with cross-site scripting, what's something interesting that we could do?
We can make like a pop-up that says click here with some link that you can steal cookies with.
Do that, right? But what's a faster way to get someone's cookie? Instead of asking them for it, what else can we do?
Steal it from them?
To steal it,
Okay.
right? We basically have control of their DOM at this point, which means the cookie is stored there, right? So let's see if you guys can get the cookie to print out on this page. So if you need help, do some Google searches. Ask your neighbor, how do you get the cookie, get a cookie using JavaScript? Yep.
Can you write it in the comment box or something?
Yep, so that's JavaScript, so we need to be able to run JavaScript. Hey, here we go. So there's one person popping up the cookie in the alert box. Good, so we got one. Got one. Did you get the admin password? That was tricky. No, get the password. Okay. Yep. Yep.
I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe comment number 3. Someone did that.
And I mean, you guys know how to hack this interface, so you could check for yourselves too. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 people.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Okay. Not in here. So you need to go to comment.php. And this is where you go to your user. So you need to open the script tag just like we did. Same beginning and end. And now what we need to do, we want to steal the cookie. You want to steal the cookie? You want to pop it over?
Yeah, I want to pop it.
So we do an alert. And then parentheses. Document.cookie. Close it. And the script tag. Right. Yeah. Yep. See. I guess we could. Yeah, I don't think it did. Make sure you're concatenating it correctly. So if you're putting a string, you need to have a plus.
Yeah, that's what it did.
And then two quotes.
Yeah.
Okay. Try one more time. Okay. Any questions on this? Yeah.
What do I do after like the end script tag? I press submit to say thank you for submitting your comment.
Yep. So that means it's on my server now.
Okay.
Yep, it's here now.
How do you know it's either?
Because you're the last one. Okay, so we figured out that we have a stored cross-site scripting vulnerability. We figured out how to run a script. We figured out how to get someone's cookie. But that cookie is still not of use to us yet, right? I mean, you're just popping it up on my screen. If you're really trying to log in as me, you need a way of getting that cookie, right? So, next task is I am running a web server, and this is a little more advanced, so don't worry if you don't get this. I'm running a web server. I want you guys to get the cookie and post it to the server. Right? So this is the same server IP, and I want you to do it using a parameter of cookie equals. So I can graph this out really easily. Cookie equals, and then I want the cookie here. So, does anyone have any idea how to do this?
Cookie equals anything. Should we say that?
So, I'm gonna give you some hints. All right. So this is a web server log right here that we're looking at, right? The server log displays every page that someone browses to, in addition to a lot more information, IP address, user agent, all that stuff. More importantly right now is the string that's displayed. Oh, you guys can't see it. Okay, so we can see every page that's being requested, right? So we can see vuln. The last thing that's being requested is vuln home.php. This is also going to display. This is going to display the entire GET request, right? So that means if we do a GET request, and we pass in a parameter, this is how you pass in parameters. If we pass in a parameter and we make a request to our server, and then we append the cookie value. We just stole that cookie, right? If we control this, pretend this is on a different server that is attacker controlled, that we control as an attacker, right? So, does everyone understand what we're doing? I'll go through it one more time. So, we have an attacker controlled server, and we're looking at the web logs. We want to steal someone's cookie, so we're going to make a request using JavaScript to that server, and in that request, we're going to have a URL parameter of cookie equals document.cookie. Right? So, I'll let you guys try and mess around with it. Do some Google searches if you need, and then I'll walk around, try and help you guys out. So once you post a comment, so is anyone able to do it? Does anyone know where to start? Oh, we got someone. We got one. Is that you? Say cookie equals. So we got one person so far. So this is a more advanced attack, and this is actually what a hacker is going to do to steal someone's credentials. There we go. Cookie equals close, whoever this is, really close. Except document.cookie is not getting rendered, but you're close.
Using the comment box?
Yes. Can you raise your hand if you think you got it? Nobody yet? You guys didn't get it? Okay, I'm going to show you one way of doing it. There's plenty of ways to actually do it. So we're going to make a comment, and this is the JavaScript that I'm using. There's plenty of ways to do it. So what is this doing? Oh, you guys can't see that. Make this bigger. So what are we doing here? So we're opening up our script tags. We're creating an image, and then we're saying the source of that image is located at our server IP address, and then we're passing in the parameter of cookie equals, and then we're going to encode the document.cookie. So when that loads on the page, it's going to load as an image, right? Image source, but the source is going to try and grab it from our web server, and since we're watching that log, we're going to see document.cookie in that URL in the parameter. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
I just type all that down. So
Yep.
But how would one know to type all that down?
So honestly, you can find tons of examples online. If you know JavaScript, yeah, that's a good place. If you know JavaScript, you can just come up with it yourself. But online, you can find basically anything.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say we stole a cookie. So what do we want to do with a cookie, right? If we're trying to be malicious, what do we do with a cookie? Who said that? Steal the session. Okay. How are we going to steal the session? So what are we actually going to give to the server that's going to make them think that we are someone else? You already said it, basically. Their session, which is their cookie. So what we're going to do is, in our request to the server, instead of passing our own cookie, we're going to steal this cookie, and we're going to pass that cookie to it, right? So let me put the cookie up here. This is the session. Everyone download Burp. Okay, so open up Burp and Java. Java, if you have it installed, you should be able to run Burp without problems. And at the same time, I'll show you, so for those of you that don't have it. So this is what it would look like. You're gonna make a request, and it's as easy as this, right? Let's make a request. So what you actually need to do is you have to set your web browser to use Burp as a proxy, which it is. And then you need to set Burp to intercept requests. And now we just intercepted our own request, and we're going to replace this session ID with the one that we just stole right here. So when we pass this through, we're going to be logged in as whoever's session ID that was. So let's show a better example of how this works. I'm going to open up Chrome. So on Chrome, I'm not logged in, right? What I need to do is set up a proxy. Change proxy settings. HTTP proxy. Localhost. Burp runs on port 8080. So I'm gonna use Firefox here. Someone's redirecting me. Log out. Okay, so we are logged out right now. We don't have a session, right? We're hooked up to our proxy, Burp. We're gonna make a request. Burp has just intercepted the request. We're gonna take this cookie that we stole, and now we're gonna swap it, and we're gonna forward it. Oh, I shouldn't drop that. Okay, one more try. We're gonna replace that, forward, and look at that. We just logged in. Right? So to give you an idea of how dangerous session, this is called session hijacking, right? We just hijacked somebody's session. So this could potentially happen if even if the site is not vulnerable, but if the site is running over HTTP instead of HTTPS. Does anyone know the difference between the two?
HTTPS is secure.
Exactly. So HTTPS. Huh?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So HTTPS runs over the secure socket layer. So it's basically encrypting the whole connection between your browser and the server. So if you browse to a website and submit your login credentials over an HTTP connection, if you're not alone on that network and there's other people, like for example, on a public Wi-Fi, perfect example, and you're logging in over HTTP, if anyone is capturing packets, if anyone's listening to the traffic that's passing between there, then they can see they can see your login, your username and password, and B, they can see your session, and they can steal your cookie, and then they can sign in. So this was a huge vulnerability like a few years ago. Facebook was vulnerable, like every site that was run over HTTP and did not run on HTTPS by default had huge potential vulnerabilities because if you're on the same network as someone, they're on Facebook, and then you're watching the traffic go, even if Facebook submits the login credentials over HTTPS and the rest of the session is on HTTP, that cookie, that session ID, is being passed every single time. So if I steal his session ID and I replay it to Facebook, I'm logged in to his Facebook account. So now the big sites, they run over HTTPS, and that's the recommendation. Not everyone does it because there's a performance hit on the server because it has to decrypt and encrypt packets as they're coming in and as they're leaving. B, you have to buy a certificate, which costs money, and then you have to know how to set it up. So it's not hard to set up, but so that's the basic idea. So any questions on what we just did? Yeah.
So like any website that you can use this method.
I'm not responsible for anything you do with this information. For knowledge's sake, if there is a site running on HTTP and you're listening on the network, and does anyone know what I mean by listen on the network? Does everyone know what I mean by that?
You're watching like the stuff that's going on.
Right. So did everyone download Wireshark? Did anyone download Wireshark? Okay. Run Wireshark, and we can do this now. So Wireshark is a tool that, if configured correctly, can allow you to see all the traffic that's going on the network that you're connected to. So if there are connections that are not you'll see everyone's connection basically on that network. So that's why everything really needs to be over HTTPS. And if they're not, we can use this method to take advantage of that. So there's a couple things. So that's basically the intro to the talk. There's more to it. I have an entire basically a web app here that is set up that you can connect to, and you can see if you can break in, see what you can do to the site. It's full of security holes, so it's good practice to see what you've learned. You can do this. So all you need to do is connect to this right here. I'll write it on the board.
18.
So you can browse to there. You can play around. Then there's one other thing. This is the challenge problem of the day. I don't think anyone has gotten it yet. There is a search box, if you remember. There's a search box here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove all these cross-site scripting attempts. That search box is vulnerable to SQL injection. What I want you to try and do, if you're up for it, this is a tricky problem. So if you want to try something a little more hard, try and get the admin password. So the admin password from the database. See if you can do that. If you don't feel up to it yet, play around with the Hack Me Bank or Hack Me Books website. This is vulnerable. The login, I'll just give you a head start. The login parameters are vulnerable to get you into the site. And then there's all sorts of vulnerabilities once you're in. So see what you can do. And then let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you need help. If you're downloading Wireshark, you want to see how to grab people's cookies, we could do that too. So just let me know what you guys are working on, what you want help with. I'll be walking around. We got about 30 minutes. And if you don't feel like doing any of that, I mean, there's no pressure. You don't have to stay. Yeah, so this is just lab time, and I'll be coming around to help you guys. So, all right. Okay, so the comments should be gone. Okay, so that should make it easier for you. Jesus. Okay. Yeah, so I'll be walking around. That one's hard. Don't do this one. Yeah. Go to the bank. Go to the bookstore. That link over there. Oh, it's just HAC. And it's 127. It's that HAC. Try capitalizing your H.
Oh, caps matter.
Focus, so if you quote that, I mean that comment. That's actually.
Yeah, I thought it. This is where. I think it's the same way.
So this. Where are you going? Union or? Someone break the slide already? It's freaking here. So I'm thinking maybe it's getting overloaded. Can anyone get to this? The Hack Me books. Okay, let me try restarting the server. Okay, so I can get to it now. Can you guys just try again? Oh shit! I probably should have told you guys. Shell 5 gigs. Is everyone on that? Yeah, everyone needs to be on shell 5 gigs. And the password is over there, technology drive. That happened earlier. I just fucking forgot. Thank you.
Are you called the shell? Is that actually is that about this new app?
No, it's just
Basically ignoring.
magnet so you can design whatever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people just get called for that.
Okay.
So you should have
Well, there's an app for like college by yourself for college only.
UND?
Yeah. Well, my friend created an app called Giddy, and it's like for university level. You know, like Facebook group for buying and selling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically the app, but in an app, so you don't have to go to Facebook to do it. Yeah. And I was like, wait, someone has the same idea.
Oh,
It was just like my friend's app. And I really,
oh, is it?
everyone has the same ideas. No, it doesn't go to side of itself.
Yeah, so
Which should start up? Okay. So what is it? Is it like a website?
Yeah, I'm trying to make it a web application.
Okay. Oh, that's why you're here. Then you can make it the CPS.
so grocery is the same.
Now I'm going to be scared. Oh, so you
Yeah, everything's like
So this basically says.
I'm sure there's a way to hack HTTPS also. Okay.
So
That's crazy.
you have it intersecting.
Are you a
So
senior?
you need to hit forward.
Yeah, did you? Okay. You know what now? Okay, I'll do that then. I think pre-pharmacy right now, but I don't know if I want to go pre-pharmacy school and all that. So I'm confused about that. Just like trying to figure out what I want to do. I know I don't want to go grad school.
So Wireshark, so package Wireshark is just has to be this way. This program. See, Wireshark that's the traffic. So anyone on shelf 5 gigs, you can see what IP is going to see action. You can, if it's a race, you can accept it. I mean, you can't modify it. So you can steal it, or you can see it going across the wire, you can steal it, and you basically can't block it. You can hear it, you can actively say drop it. Wireshark, you just pass it. That were hacked. You peek that. Was anyone able to get into Hackney? Yeah. This was the Hackney Bank. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I used to dig up. Oh, you okay. I don't know if you did. Oh, did you? You work, you have to go. Yeah. But kind of like Snowden, but like without the films. Did you you said, did you find flaws?
No, I said that he finds faults in the website.
Something like that. You can't tell me.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I'm gonna secret agent with him. James Bond, so like, secret. Like there's James Bond with like stuff, and then there's him. They want to like go for it. Yeah. Like if his girlfriend's like kidnapped by like a Russian. I'm using. I know nothing about it. They were friends like, to like other stuff, other just like soccer. Other friends are also friends with like.
Yeah, it's
You want to go to the app also? The resume on the app? Okay, right. Have you tried the Udemy course? Like, it teaches you how to do web development. It makes you create 14 different websites to practice making web apps. Udemy. Yeah, you heard of Udemy? It's like a, basically like a, online courses for anything. And then, there's this, you can get these for like a discount every once in a month. All of these have like a 7% discount.
The interface looks much nicer again. I think I was learning something on Coursera, people are actually standing there.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. It's where I learned a lot of stuff. Web development for beginners. Get a website live. Yeah, I think it's a great website. You can also learn like cool
It's
stuff.
about a book about PHP and
All types of, it's not just computer.
nice.
But,
So it is like Coursera then.
yeah, it's like Coursera, but it costs money.
But it costs money, you're right. But not yeah.
But there's like a lot more courses on this than Coursera.
Let's see. Move, right? I haven't tried Move yet. Cool.
Yeah, this is too hard. That is too hard. I get stuck. Trying to get stuck. Hey.
Like, I know you have a job that you cannot tell anyone.
Who said that?
Are you tricking me again? I cannot tell. Like,
I was supposed to do that.
right? But anyway, I'm building a web application about a resume builder. I don't really know how to build a web application, but
Yeah.
I'm working with my friend. I'm in Shell, and
Okay.
I'm just thinking, is it possible when it's built to have you look at it or hack it, or like something to
Sure.
have you just look at it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like how can I? Do you have a card? Or?
I don't have a card, but I can give you like my email or phone number, and then you can.
Yeah, can you give me your email?
Yeah.
It's okay, I mean, that's.
It's really cool though what you do. It makes me really interested.
Yeah, it's fun.
Are you in the cybersecurity club? I think what they do is really fun.
Yeah. Are you part of it?
No, I'm not. I would like pass by and look what they do. Look really fun.
You should do it. You know, he's your guy over there. He's the president.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice to meet you.
So if you wanna go, you should definitely talk to him. Jay? Yeah, let's talk about that. There's number 2.
Thank you very much.
Hey, no problem. What can you do with Bird?
Yeah, I'm actually really confused with that.
Okay. So you see that you can intercept. Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So you see that you can intercept requests. So go to proxy, yeah, intercept.
Okay.
So if you turn intercept on,
You stop me from.
and then you can modify them.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's how we basically session hijacked, right? We stole someone's cookie. We made a request to the server. We replaced our cookie with their cookie, and the server processed the cookie as if we were them.
Oh.
Right.
So this is how we would like. We would. But we can only intercept the local session, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, so you can only intercept packets that are coming from your machine.
Mm-hmm.
So you can still intercept going to like Google or Facebook, but only your system, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is specifically just for testing stuff. Yeah.
It's not just for testing. I mean, I use this in like live pen tests and
Mm-hmm.
when I'm doing stuff, but yeah,
Okay.
that's what a lot of
Packets. Well, how do you intercept other people's packets?
You can't exactly. So I mean, it's possible, but it's not like
Okay.
you're not supposed to be able to really. Right? It's really hard. So there are ways that you can force people's packets to come to you. There's like ARP cache poisoning. There's DNS poisoning. There's different attack vectors to kind of simulate that, but like what you're talking about is not really.
Yeah. It sounds really complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it's not too complicated to do once you understand it.
Yeah, but certainly more complicated than like
Then this.
like SQL queries.
Yeah. A little bit.
I actually never got. I never got a session running here though. By the way, I don't know what I'm typing in wrong. Like, is the syntax just like whatever, and then do the same thing?
the password section and put an or.
So that these ticks are probably screwing up the query.
Yeah.
Probably because I mean it's not sanitized. So
Okay.
just try like random. Okay.
Mhm.
And then in here do the ticks.
Okay.
Tick or tick space or remember
So tick, then like something, and then
tick space or
oh,
space.
okay. Or just capitalized.
Doesn't have to be.
So tick, and then
One equals
just one.
one tick equals tick one. Let me see. So let's do a valid username. I'm sorry, you can't just type in anything there. It has to be, that side has to return true, right?
Oh, okay.
So, okay. So, type in tick
Or
or
gave you access. Or the admin password.
something like that. So that's the query.
Oh, they put it into the password.
Did you watch? Were you doing everything or
I was
Any of it?
watching part of it.
okay? Did you learn anything?
I don't think I paid attention to the parts I did. But
It's
I
all good.
always prepare and execute your queries, right?
There you go. Lesson
Never, just paste them in there.
lesson learned. Exactly. Yep. Sanitize.
Yeah, exactly. Great exercise.
What? Did you get in?
I am like this close.
Yeah?
I'm asked, just looking for a little direction.
Okay.
So the union.
You want to motivate the crowd.
That's what he would want. That's funny, man.
On Adderall the whole 10 hours.
Thanks. Hey, what's your name? Tim. Tim, nice to meet you. Are you in the shell or?
No, I'm not.
Cool.
This is on my first time.
Cool. Well, hopefully you learn something. Yes. And get you started on learning other stuff. So. Yeah, man.
I saw it used to.
I just found out about this year.
Yeah, I know.
You what?
Like I got some building teams on the video games.
Oh yeah. Cool. Of Hack Me or just generally the topics. Oh, okay. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming. How do I end this?
Trying to build a team.
It's still the over.
Yeah, and that's still on oh, they upgraded it. It looks much better than the
That's what keep
Yeah,
it.
I feel like. But I like lives a lot.
Yeah, I can see that.
Remember Justin? Did you know Justin?
Oh god, I met him twice. He was the Windows wizard.
Yes.
Yeah.
The wizard.
Yeah, he was a good
I'm
man.
so late. I didn't
Yeah, he
do this in high
was.
school. I just started this like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So
So he's on there in stream right now?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that
Holy
stop
shit.
broadcast button is how to stop it.